brother Milo Stoudemire, who passed from COVID-19. But that article, I read an article in Slate magazine that was titled, "America is a Sham. Policy changes in reaction to the coronavirus reveal how absurd so many of our rules are to begin with." Suddenly we could take 12 ounces of hand sanitizer on a plane. Can y'all hear me? Because there was something on my screen. We could offer rent and utility moratoriums. We could provide stimulus or basic universal income to every American. As the frenetic energy of the crisis spread, that article would keep coming back to me and the words would steady me. They really opened a portal that allowed my whisper initially to become a scream and a yell and a demand. And it helped me and our team to embrace now as the time to reimagine everything. And so we started asking this question that we have continued to ask through Centering Justice, and that is, what must and will transform as a result of what we're learning as individuals, as organizations, and as a community? The murder of George Floyd, Ahmaud Arbery, Tony Cade, Breonna Taylor, there were horrifying reminders that reform, in other words, trying to fix a broken system, would not save the lives of Black people. It wouldn't suffice. What we are longing for is transformation. We're longing for things made anew. And so Centering Justice was really born out of that longing for things made anew and trusting Black, Indigenous, and people of color leaders to lead the way. Like many of you here today, we continue to seek answers, new ways of being. Personally, I'm deepening my own work around internalized racism, trauma, and white supremacy. That study has led me to re-examine past movement leaders and to look for the wisdom of our elders, because really nothing is new. We're just reimagining what is. And so recently I looked to the thought leader, Paulo Freire. He's a Brazilian philosopher and the author of The Pedagogy of the Oppressed. And in 1968, he wrote this, and I quote, "This then is the great humanistic and historical task of the oppressed, to liberate themselves and their oppressors as well. The oppressors who oppress, exploit, and rape by virtue of their power cannot find in that power the strength to either liberate the oppressed or themselves. Only power that springs from the weakness of the oppressed will sufficiently be strong enough to free both. Any attempt to soften the power of the oppressor in deference to the weakness of the oppressed almost always manifests itself in the form of false generosity. Indeed, the attempt never goes beyond this. In order to have the continued opportunity to express their generosity, the oppressors must perpetuate injustice as well. An unjust social order is the permanent fount of this generosity, nurtured and nourished by death, despair, and poverty. That is why the dispensers of false generosity become desperate at the slightest threat to its source." He goes on to say that true generosity consists precisely in fighting to destroy the causes which nourish false charity. False charity constrains the fearful and subdues the, quote, rejects of life to extend their trembling hands. True generosity lies in striving so that those hands, whether individuals or entire people, actually need to be extended less and less in supplication, so that more and more become human hands which work and work together to transform the world. I believe him. And the last 6 months have made me question everything. I've relied less on crisis management or traditional leadership strategies rooted in white and patriarchal approaches. And instead I've leaned into wisdom, experience, and the collective genius we all harness. I've started saying out loud now, y'all, things aren't working. And at New, we're challenging ourselves as well to think differently and to act differently. And the truth is that it shouldn't have taken a pandemic to get here. You and I, all of you know that as a community and nation, we've been looking for new ways to work, lead, and serve because what we're doing is not healthy. And it certainly is not transformational. How could the conditions we're operating under be transformational? Stress, burnout, a lack of DEI, even the marginal outcomes that most of our missions strive towards demonstrate unmet opportunity. Despite our best efforts, those of us who work in the social sector have seen slow, arduous, and incremental change, and New is not an exception. In recognizing this, I knew I wanted to help our staff. And so like many of you, we're using this moment to reflect on the absurdity that's been heightened in this moment, not made new. We're questioning our role as an organization, and we want to start to reimagine everything. So that took me to Facebook, y'all. How about that profound moment? It took me to Facebook, to a women's leadership group, where I asked for advice on how to support my employees. I myself am a parent, and about a quarter of our staff are. And how could I ask them to come to work every day when their babies needed them at home? And I couldn't figure out how to make it possible for them to prioritize their families and still run our businesses. And so I reached out in this group and said, help me. And Ambra Redrick, who's with us, was one of the first to reply. And it really is talking to her and Lila Asante-Appiah, who is News board chair and a confidant for me and a mentor. And then my girl, Angela Barbash, who's with us. She was on a 1 month long sabbatical when I reached out. Imagine that. And you're gonna hear a little bit more about that, but I needed their dialogue. I needed them, I needed their wisdom. And the three of these dope women, y'all, have not only been a source of hope and inspiration for me, but salve to my soul. And so when we were conceiving of today's session about reimagining the future of our organizations and centering justice, I couldn't imagine doing it without the three of them. So y'all hold on tight, because this trio is #badass. And we're gonna have a great presentation. Will, can you take us forward?
Absolutely, and my apologies, folks, because I have to hop off here in a few more minutes to do another presentation, but it's awesome to see all of you. Thank you so much for joining us again for another Centering Justice conversation. So to help you get to know, these folks on our panel and what's kind of like bringing them together today, I want to pose this question that I'm going to ask each of them to answer. And that's, what communities and experiences are you drawing upon, right, as you enter this conversation today? And Lila, you're off mute, so do you mind kicking this off for us? What's kind of coming up for you today?
Yeah, thank you. Thanks, Will, and thank you, Yodit, for that awesome introduction. I'm so thrilled to be here with all of you today and looking forward to sharing and learning from each of you. So, I think what has, I've thought a lot about that question and reflected on kind of who I am and kind of what brought me to this space today. Obviously, I'm a leader in the nonprofit community, and I'm a mom, to 3 beautiful daughters and a wife to Dan for 32 years. But when I think about what led me here, what's influenced me, I kind of go back to my formative years. I think about the kind of my parents and their, somewhat autocratic parenting style, which was challenging for me. And from that, I quickly learned how to conform and to assimilate. Luckily, it was coupled with a lot of mentoring, encouragement, and support from a beautiful older sister, Phyllis. And in the first 15 years of my professional career, I worked in corporate settings that were in predominantly white spaces. And these settings were hierarchical, where following the rules and doing what needed to be done, what was right, what was kind of acceptable, was easy for me, right, to just take that step and do it because of the kind of my formative years and what was required. I was often the only female and person of color. I quickly adapted, to the leader that fit in with the work environment and work culture. I assimilated essentially because I thought this would enable me to be successful. So when I took my first leadership role in the nonprofit sector, I started to kind of question whether the story I'd been telling myself was actually true, about who I was as a person and a leader, the leader that I actually was and wanted to be. In all honesty, I wasn't really living out my values and leading from my truest self. I was missing the opportunity that I think all leaders have to increase self-awareness and understand the why, their why, and the impact they have on those within their sphere of influence. I'm a coach, also a professional coach. And so I feel strongly that, if we don't know our why, kind of we'll never truly understand why we think, feel, and behave the way that we do, and the effect that we have on others and how people experience us. So I'm really passionate about where we are in justice and how leaders set the culture within organizations. And this is why I'm such an advocate for helping people be their best selves and encourage leaders to put people first.
Thank you so much for sharing that, Lila.
Sure.
I know we get to hear a little bit more of your style and your perspective in the conversation going forward. But I would be remiss if I did not do a Leadership Deli plug, because Lila and Dana are one of our partners in Leadership Deli. They bring their purposeful pursuits, adopting a talent mindset session to us. So if you have the opportunity and you want to dive deeper, I can't not do it. It's part of my job. So thanks for bearing with that plug, y'all. I'm going to bounce things on over to Angela now. Angela, same question. What experiences, what communities are kind of you bringing with you to this conversation today?
Yeah, thanks for having me, Yodit and Will and Ananya. And hello to everyone I know and don't know yet on the call. It's really an honor to be here. And you'll hear my 5-year-old somewhere elsewhere on the other side of the door in the background. But when I was going through the questions for today's time with you all, and I got to this one, the first thing that came to my mind was that I got here through 1,000 cuts. And I really just kind of reeled from the adversity that I've experienced. I'm the daughter and granddaughter of activists and farm laborers on my father's side, who had to fight really, really hard to get out from underneath the thumb of the controlling parties and that whole rhythm of life, and to get into some level of work that was outside of the farm labor world. And then on my mom's side, I'm an only child. She was a single mother and she was an addict. And it was really, really difficult upbringing, not just in everything that was thrown my way because of these factors, but also in that as I got older, I realized that I kept asking questions about the world that others perceived to be heretical. I mean, it was heresy to ask the questions that I was asking, and it was radical. And every time I would run up against the systems, I work in financial services, and every time I would push against that system, I would feel the rebound of it really hard and really fast. And I never felt like I really fit in there. And it wasn't so much that I was asking the question of, why does this system work this way? Because I think I inherently didn't really want to know why. I already intuitively knew why it worked that way, because the people in power want to stay in power, and so they set up this system, just like all other systems, to serve their needs to be in power. So that wasn't the question I was asking. The question I was really asking was, why can't I create a different system? Why can't we have a different way of being? Why is that not possible? Why do I get laughed at when I even propose such a thing, and get called a heretic? And despite how that was received, I just never stopped. I never stopped asking that question of why can't we create a different system, a better system? And instead of trying to change the system, let's create a concurrent system that doesn't need that system anymore. And I didn't realize that that was going to take me on an entire lifelong journey that I now realize is going to be a multi-generational effort. That started with my grandmother and has led to me, and will move on to my granddaughter or grandson. But that's really where I'm at now. I stopped trying to fit into that broken system and stopped trying to change that broken system. But I also didn't get discouraged because of what the system is. I just saw it for what it was.
Thank you for sharing that, Angela. Man, 1,000 cuts for sure. That was awesome. And yeah, I just appreciate that, everything that you shared there so much. Angela is also one of our up and coming Leaders of Color Fellows in the Champions for Change Fellowship. So really excited to be able to, hear from you on this platform as well. And last but certainly not least, Ambra, you kind of inspired Yodit to bring this whole conversation forward. What communities, what experiences are you bringing with you to this conversation today?
Hey, good people. So raised by my grandparents, right? Who had about an 8th grade education. Both of my parents at the time were using drugs, so they just couldn't take care of me. And I was sent to a school, and we didn't talk about, what school. I'm the one person in Detroit who Cass and Renaissance was never a conversation. And on the first day, I walked into the school and I immediately felt unsafe. And if you've ever felt unsafe, then you know that feeling. And in that moment, I made a decision to spend as much time as I could outside of the classroom. And that put me into the hands and arms of people who didn't have my best interests at heart. And so I went and visited a boy and at a crack house. And as I was sitting there and waiting on him to return, another guy just kind of walks past. I'm like, what are you doing here? You don't even belong here. And I could have easily left and walked away. No one held me against my will. But I stayed because I was looking for something. And that night I was sexually assaulted in that house. And I never said a word. And 2 years later, I would become a teen parent. And I knew that I was not promiscuous. I knew I was not bad. I knew that the labels that followed me were not a true reflection of who I was. But I also knew that there was something missing. And so I do this work so that no other young person has to live this story. And I co-founded Teen Hype 16 years ago. And probably about 4 years ago, I found myself exhausted. I got up and was like, why am I tired? Is it my blood sugar? And I didn't want to go to work. And that wasn't like me because I was a total workaholic, like work 16 hours all the time. And one of my friends was just talking to me and she was like, do you realize that you are not like most CEOs? And I was like, huh, what you talking about? And she was like, well, first of all, you are underpaid. That's why you're carrying your child everywhere. You don't have childcare. And then the other thing is that some people actually have like work-life balance. And I just had no concept. I thought that as a leader, I was supposed to self-sacrifice and I had to give all. And leadership meant just doing every single thing that I could on behalf of young people. And now, as a co-founder, I'm thinking about who's sitting in the seat after me. I'm thinking about what it means to role model good leadership for my staff and to teach them about, how to balance that out. Because, how do you take care of other people's kids and still take care of yours? And to take care of yourself. So I'm just really, really in a different place right now, one in which I'm finding myself saying no to things that I think are not right? And if I think that that means no to money, not no to other opportunities, no to things that do not honor young people, no to, not pausing and allowing ourselves to think through things. So I'm excited to be here.
Thank you so much, Ambra, for opening up and sharing, all of that with us. It's certainly a gift, right? When people kind of, give us their whole selves. So thank you so much. Before I have to bounce on off here, I want to get the ball rolling back on over. Or Yodi, you came off mute. You got something for us?
I was going to take the mic if you need to make your
Come
transition.
on. Boom. Mic handed.
Cool. I got you. Yeah, we really this core question, y'all. And Lila, I'm gonna start with you. I mentioned earlier this question we've been asking, right? How must we transform? And in particular, thinking about the fall, how must we transform our organizations, Lila, to center justice now and into the future? Can you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, thank you. I will love to. I mean, I think that for me, I think it's a paradigm shift. It's kind of how I think about it in relative to the employer, kind of employee contract, how employers see their employees, how employees see their employer. Certainly we're all thinking about, where and how work gets done and reimagining how that looks and challenging our thoughts. And to your earlier statement around, y'all, this ain't working really well, to think that we have to do work in traditional ways and measure performance, if you will, in this very, way that allows people to have to be at work to get work done. And I think that's certainly a shift. I think that it's also a shift from being employee-centered to people-centered. And I person-centered. I think that's a really significant shift for some people. I think, maybe not for all, but I think we can all, as folks supervising or leading through others or et cetera, getting work done through others, can really challenge themselves to say, what does it mean to be employee-centered versus person-centered? It's about the person, right? It's about who they are at their very core. How do we create an environment where they can feel comfortable? We know belonging is certainly important, and oftentimes we don't know how to create belonging. Areas where people feel connectedness, et cetera. And it's about getting to know the person for who they are, all of who they are. Sometimes that can be uncomfortable for people and for leaders based on how they're wired. I think it's about stability and security and flexibility. I think we're looking at our organizations at the lowest hierarchical level. When you think about Maslow's hierarchy of needs, I think we have to focus on that lowest level of stability and security for our team members. And I think it's also about advocating for your employees without taking away their power, their individual power. I think that as leaders, we have to share power and walk away from thinking we're the smartest person in the room, and really think about who else has something. We know we have hired talent, right? If we've been intentional about hiring the best talent that's available in the market, how do we then leverage the talent? Once we get folks in the space, so to speak, and give them what they need to be successful. So, I think that's that comes to mind when I think about how we need to be thinking differently about how we look at our organizations.
Yeah, it was that kind of thinking differently that as I mentioned earlier, took me to Facebook. And I want to acknowledge that new is very different than our clients, who the majority of whom are human service organizations. So we had the privilege of sending our staff to work remotely, for example. And I know that not everybody on this call has that benefit, but Ambra, there was I'm gonna ask this same question of you, and then also invite you to share, because we talked about that tension, right? You're running an organization that's providing services to the community, and the adaptations you had to make. Can you talk a little bit, what needs to transform Ambra, in our organizations to center justice?
So when COVID first like fell on the scene, like everyone else, our staff went home. And I remember I went on Facebook, because I guess that's the authority now. And I went on Facebook and I saw all the organizations kind of coming together, and they were out there. And my initial thought was like, oh my goodness, we need to be out there, because I knew that we had young people and we had families that needed us. But in the very next moment, I thought about my staff, and I thought, like, so to what point? So if I put my staff out there that have compromised immune systems, and they are out there trying to provide services, and I put their lives at risk, and that's a very difficult decision, to know that there are people in need and you can't figure exactly out how to support them. And so for us, we've always been very kind of family centered. So we in a very organic way, we just kind of tightened ourselves. We got to this place where we were doing weekly check-ins. And I remember going out, and I didn't exactly know what to do. So I just went and picked up some supplies and dropped them off at the office, and said to the staff, like, okay, so this is where it's at: laundry detergent, toilet paper, whatever, it's at the office. If you need it, grab it. And went back to some of the things, before COVID, we were thinking about how to create a wellness program for our staff. What does it mean to help our staff to think about self-care, especially if you got a leader that's a workaholic? Clearly, I wasn't role modeling it. I need to enroll myself. But what do we have to do in order to kind of help them to kind of take care of themselves? And I'm so glad that we were kind of heading down that path, because what I didn't realize was going to happen is that we were going to get hit with grief. And so we're small. We've only got about 12 employees. And we had staff losing parents, losing close loved ones just within, a couple of months. And so it's been hard to say no. It's been hard to say, like, you know what, I don't know when we're going to do that. We might not do that at all. But I also know that that when our staff and our people are well, that we can do the best for the young people that we serve. And that our young people, they become what they see. So if they see strong women who take care of themselves, they become strong women who take care of themselves, and strong men that take care of themselves. And if they see people who self-sacrifice and give it all away, then we send the wrong messages. And so that's just a small part kind of where I'm at.
That's so powerful. I have to uplift a quote that you said, not to use exhaustion as a badge of honor. Thank you for that, because it's sitting now on a Post-it in front of me. And let me just say a little bit more, if I can, before I ask you the same question, which is that you started telling me, Yo D, I'm gonna have to have this last meeting with you. We were working on a different project together by this date, because at that point, my entire company is shutting down for a month. And we do this. So I want to enter this from when we talk about transformation, and typically centering justice features leaders who are leading nonprofits, because that keeps fidelity with our organization, or, decentralized networks connected to nonprofits. Revalue is not a nonprofit, but you are really thinking deeply about social change and social impact in your work. So can you answer this same question? How do our organizations transform to center justice, and how are you using care as a tool for justice at Revalue?
Yeah, thanks, Yodit. And you're right, we're not a nonprofit, but I think we might have been had we been legally allowed to be. So that's a systemic issue, right? In financial services, as an investment firm, we're forced into a for-profit model, but that doesn't mean that we have to follow the profitability metrics that the rest of our industry sets, which we don't. But we do need to be sustainable. But where that came from, the month-long sabbatical, for context, we do that twice a year. We take a month in the summer and a month in the winter. So we take 2 months of 12 months, and then staff can take whatever other time they need to take off. We don't track it. It's on, just take what you need kind of system. And maybe as we get larger, that changes, but for now, that's worked. But we started doing that. We're 8 years old now. So we started doing that in like year 2, because we started having babies, and we're women led for the most part. And we recognized that we needed to breathe. And the thing about the industry that we're in is that it is, you're managing people's money, which is a very serious thing. And it's tied to this short-termism, this moment by moment rhythm of the markets, that from 9:30 a.m. to 4 p.m. Monday through Friday, except for federal holidays, you must pay attention to this. That is the mantra that our industry paints, the picture that it painted for all of us in our company that got into this industry before we landed at Revalue. And we were like, that's not human. That's not humane. That's not humane to us, and that's not humane to investors, and we're not going to do that. And that doesn't mean that we can turn our eye completely away from it. So we had to build in order to do this, we had to build in the right systems to allow us to both care for our clients' best interests, which is our mandate, but to also care for ourselves and to not sacrifice ourselves and our families and our children for the care of our clients, because if we're not caring for ourselves, we're not caring for them. That is not serving our clients' best interests if we're burnt out all the time. And so we started this as a tradition. And in the early years, our clients were like, this is insane. Like, who does this? They really had a hard time understanding why. But as they, get with us, they're, 3-4 years, they've been with us for longer. Now they're like, good for you, because what we do with that month-long break, half of it, we take as a straight holiday and we just check out. And the other half of it, we take as a professional development break. And so we're off reading books, and we're listening to podcasts, and we're taking web courses, and, we're building up our skills, but we're doing it on our time. And it's not a mandate where as a leader, I'm like, you need to go learn this, or you need to go learn that based on your last review. That's not it. I think it was Ambra that said this, or maybe Yodit, you said this, that we need to put the power in the team's hands, right? It's their decision. What do they want to build in their skill set? Where do they want to go with their career within us, or even beyond us if they have to go, to a different place to get a different level of experience or whatever in the future. We bless and release them, because that's what they need, not what we need. So that's really where that came from. And other ways that we're caring, I think, when I think of other examples, like the announcement we made this week about opening the doors to anyone and removing our minimum fees and, all of that. And if people are not familiar with what I'm talking about, just go find us on social media and you'll find it. But when I think about that, I think about the reviews that we did with our staff after we came back from break, like 360 reviews, and did a lot of trust building work with each other to really touch base on how everyone was doing in their core, how was their spirit in the midst of COVID, in the midst of George Floyd and everything that's happening right now. I think what is underpinning all of that is how can we do better, right? Let's challenge ourselves to care more. Let's challenge ourselves to help wherever we can, and to trust that if we open the door for our team to share what's really going on in their lives and where the stressors are, and to Lila's point, be person-centered and not employee-centered. If we do that, then we're doing what we can. We can't make people be open. We can't make people, take us up on our offers of community service or whatever, but we can do our part. We can put them first as people, and not as employees, not as clients, not as part of our business model, whatever, set all of that aside. Let's just put people first in that way and do what we can control, which is to challenge ourselves to be more efficient, to create better systems, to make it more streamlined and affordable for us to serve anyone in the community, whatever it is that we need to do. So, so that's all. Those are all the things that came up for me when you asked this question. Yeah.
No, I appreciate that, and I know you're you know, you characterize the step with reducing barriers to investing as a trust fall with your clients.
Yeah.
And specifically, you talked about, which I think is so important, and I can see it kind of blowing up in the chat, like this function, this system that we're operating in, right, that prioritizes profit over people. I mean, when I posted that Facebook message, it was because it's one thing for me to say, you know, hey, you can work a flexible schedule, right, to my staff. But in reality, what that looks like for me and what they've shared back with me is that they're actually working more, right? Because they now have to get up early, right? Put the time in, help their children or families or the people they're providing care for, and then get back on if I expect them to give that 8-hour day, right? And I was socialized in a Fortune 100 company where you give the company its time. And so part of our conversations anew about what needed to be made anew, right, or transformed have been about, well, how important is it to count those butts in seats, right? Do we have another way to measure success? When Lila talks about being people-centered, that means the whole person, right? Not just them as a budget line item. And so I saw capitalism coming up, and I don't mean to kind of throw this at you unexpectedly, but I saw your comment there. I mean, how do we navigate when we're trying? This isn't just words to me, right? Like, I'm not just saying, oh, let's be just. I'm really trying to figure out how I can transform new. Me and Ambra talked about, like, how could we pause our organizations in some way this fall? And as soon as I even have the audacity to utter that, I can think about my bosses asking me about our P&L statement, right? I can think about, you know, a human service organization saying, well, who's gonna get the food to the people in the community? How do we hold this tension, Ange?
I think that is a great question, and one that can only be answered through deep discovery in a trusting group of people, right? Because maybe the answer for how you get the food to the people and still take a pause is by strategically partnering with another organization that's doing a pause on a different schedule than you, right? And you pick up the work for them and they pick up the work for you when you're doing it. Maybe it's just like, it just is completely outside of anything we've ever done before. And that's what I meant when we were preparing for this call, and I said that what we're doing with the community and completely removing our minimum fees and just letting anyone come in the door is a trust fall with the community, but we believe that it's the right trust fall to make because we've done what we can do internally to make that efficient, and betting on community hardly ever loses. But I think betting on community also means forging those partnerships and relationships and changing expectations, or saying no to power centers that want your attention in lieu of serving the people in the neighborhoods. I think, like, those are the hard decisions that we have to make. And all I can tell you is keep pushing and challenging it, right? Keep challenging. Like, if it's a profit margin or P&L issue, you know, keep challenging. Well, why do we have to do the system of work that way? Why does that piece have to be in there? Or why can't we find a better way to do it? And I think that inherently makes us better leaders. And not, we're not finding efficiency for profitability. We're finding efficiency for humanity. You know, it's the same. It's like the same process, but for a different end, right? And I think that leads you to make a different decision, so that you're not throwing people under the bus to get those profit margins. You're instead lifting them up to get to the humanity that you're trying to get to. I don't know if that
And
helps.
yeah, I think it's hugely helpful. I'm gonna just kind of open it up, but Ambra, talk, maybe you can hop in here on this tension, right? Of profit versus impact and impact, quantity over quality. Where are you at on that?
So first I'll say that one of the things that we're trying is that we got away from that kind of traditional 9 to 5, and instead of being time-based, we became project-based. So, whatever time it takes for you to do it is whatever time it takes for you to do. If you're responsible for the evaluation report, you want to do it at 2:00 in the morning, do it at 2:00 in the morning. And for our staff, we asked them so what kind of schedule works? And they wanted 10 hours, 4 days a week. And we're like, okay, so the 3-day weekend makes it easier for them to take care of errands and take care of other stuff. So we changed the schedules. And it hasn't always been easy. It doesn't work well. It's not convenient, but it works for us right now. And so being small, one of the benefits I think has been that we've been able to be nimble enough to keep asking people so what do you need now? And holding ourselves accountable to asking and to really listening. I think that the same is true for young people, that we get into this place where a lot of times if you're funded to run a program, we talked about the fact that one, at Teen High, we don't have any clients. And so, often I remember I got a report and somebody was like, well, how many, little widgets, how many times did the kids do this? How many times did the clients do this? And I'm like, I don't have any clients. We don't have any clients. We have young people that are co-partners. We have co-leaders. We have young people that receive services, but we don't have clients. And so I really, really wanted to get away from this concept of what young people need are 2 programs of these, 3 of this. And instead of understanding that the services that we provide are slow and over time and our quality. And when you as a parent, you don't serve your kid 2 of this and 3 of that, you take good care of them and provide them with the skills that they need in order to be successful. And if you do that, then you get the outcomes that you want to raise the next generation leader, to make sure that little king that runs behind your deep is ready. And that doesn't mean that he participates in a STEM program or that he participates in an art program, but he participates in a program that provides the skill sets and mindsets he needs in order to be successful. And those things are easily defined. And I think that is not about 2 of this and 3 of that, but just quality over time.
Honey child, let me just thank you. I can't even formulate words for how fortunate we are to have your voice. Lila, let me get you in. And actually at this point, feel free to conversate. I mean, we want to move a little bit into talking a little bit what are your demands or your invitations of the community? But Lila, I'd love to hear any reflection on what we've talked about so far.
Yeah, I was listening to Ambra and Angela. I agree with everything you've said. I think that it's really about kind of redefining the future, right? And not limiting ourselves to, I think it's so easy for us to think about what we've always done and kind of stay in this box of what we've always done and not even look at changing the chairs on the deck and not going to a new deck. And I think it's hard sometimes to consider what possibilities could be, but I think starting maybe with, what do we really value, right? I think I'm a big proponent of values for organizations and for people, because if we really, identify what our values are at our very core and use that as a guidepost for us to identify how we want to live out our values, then, that it becomes a little easier to say, okay, if we continue to challenge ourselves against our values and bump up these new ideas, ideally against that, or these old paradigms against that, then we can maybe find a new path. I do think it's also about balance. I know it's hard. I think you have to start somewhere. I think we just can't stay stuck. I think it's not going to be perfect. I think sometimes we look for perfection and we don't want to move forward in new ideas until it's perfectly identified and all the plans are worked out. But I think we have to, you know, take some chances, right? And not look for perfection as our kind of our litmus test. I think it's about doing what we do with excellence, like, as it's measured against what our values are.
You know, interesting that you bring up values, and I think I saw somebody dropped in the chat. And one of the things when I mentioned at the onset, my own examination of internalized white supremacy is when you talk about values, the sort of cultural norms and values and attributes that almost every institution is operating within. I mean, this kind of dichotomous thinking that you just lifted up, this idea that it has to be this way or that way, or the spirit of perfectionism, which keeps us from being vulnerable, like Ambra was, right? Or this worship of the written word, which by and large has left our country ignorant of its true history, because the written word has often come from a homogenous group of scholars, researchers, authors, right? At least what we're reading. And even the practices, the ways in which we apply methodologies that we borrow from the academy and from corporate, and we know that there is an underrepresentation in those sectors and ours of diverse voices. So we're essentially taking very male, very white, very patriarchal, and very methods and approaches to our work, and overlaying them in a sector that's supposed to be transformational. And at least in my 20 years in this sector, I've seen incremental change at best. And frankly, it's sickening at this point. Now, at this point, I'm complicit in it. And as the next generation of leaders that Ambra's uplifting start to challenge us to think about, are we still going to keep a conversation about police reform going? Or are we going to admit that policing is not working and abolish it, right? Are we going to keep working in a nonprofit sector that in 50 years has not eradicated poverty? In 50 years, we haven't seen the percentage of people living in poverty in this country change. Are we going to keep doing the same thing over and over again and expect a different outcome? You know, we already know the answer to that. So, oh gosh, thank you, Tammy. Tammy's also lifting up. So, you know, that's the important work that I've had to do. I'm trying to think about how am I enacting in policies, in procedures, you know, in practices, even in our ways of being. We've been hosting a weekly racial dialogue at NEW with our staff. I am putting out on those statements and Black Lives Matter. Black Lives Matter been mattered to me, but we did know that we needed to do some work in our organization and at the board level. And I could see that if we don't have a new way of being, in an organization, my organization is a majority white staff, we're going to replicate what we've seen playing out in the country, this divisive approach to the future we want that isn't at all imaginative or creative, but is all about kind of taking positions, right? So if we're reimagining and centering justice, you know, my ask is first that we begin to use practices like I'm learning around deep heart-centered listening. Shout out to Lori Saginaw and the experts, or not even experts, but the teachers and the healers who are teaching us how to listen differently, how to hear differently, right? How to slow down. Thank you to Resma Menachem, who's teaching us, along with other healers, how to be in our bodies, right? Not just in our minds. Those are just a few kinds of things that I'm asking, like, let's move beyond just our head and into our hearts and our bodies. And let's really, if we're trying to change, let's listen, and not just to the talking heads. Ambra, you know, what would a demand of yours be?
I saw somebody wrote in the chat box about reducing the workload, and I would ask us to consider what the real work is. I think we get a lot of busy work, but are we really doing the work? You know, a lot of times if we just slow down a minute and pause and ask ourselves what is the real work, in many ways that in itself could kind of reduce the workload. I would love I have never in 16 years had a funder ask me how we take care of our staff. I've never had that be a question. I asked about resumes and qualifications and did you submit your audit and your 990 and all these other things, but nobody ever said you take good care of your staff. Nobody ever said, you know, are you a good employer? Those are not questions. So I hope that those that are listening and those who are in those rooms begin to think, to ask different questions, to hold us accountable, to be better to people. I'll stop there.
Yeah, Lila and Ange, just, come off. Y'all, we're good. Take your time, talk, say what you got to say. We're here for it.
I just got off mute because I wanted to just lift up what Ambra just said just said around, asking different questions. And I know that, you and I have talked about this and, capacity building, what does it really look like to help our nonprofits build capacity in ways that our funders, some funders, use these typical measures of how, what success looks like and identifying how nonprofits need to look. And I think about, when we're building a grant and we're looking at having these low administrative fees, percents, charged to a grant, that's really, just challenging and stretching people beyond belief because they can't get it all done, but we want to be deemed as being a appropriate fundee to receive these grant dollars, and we're just stretching our people to the hilt. And so, I think about how do we challenge, our thinking around how does that look and how do we, get our voice heard and change the narrative for, funders on what the measures are to show effectiveness for nonprofits. I think too, when I think about demands and challenges, just, I always again talk about it from the leadership perspective and organizations, because we have such a significant impact on people and how people feel they can, do their best is, take the time to figure out what our why is, what our purpose is, and do our part, right, to move the needle on how we're thinking about who we are and how we get work done through the folks that are really committed to help underserved and underprivileged, folks within our communities.
That's good to hear both you and Lila and Ambra, your comments. And Ambra, when you were talking about how no funder has ever asked you how you take care of your people, I don't know if you saw it, but I was preaching in the comments, ask them those questions. How do you take care of your people, right? Like start putting that back on them. To the question of what would my challenger ask me of the community, I think, I've got an easy one and I've got a hard one. The easy one is be values aligned with your resources, with your time, your money, your energy. And when I talk about money, I'm talking giving, spending, saving, investing. That's all one pot of money. These are not, I see this all the time. People will have different sets of values for different pots of money, forgetting that it's all one pot of resources that they have at their disposal to do something in the world with. And so I would ask you to be values driven with all of that. And when you're paying for financial planning, investment management, that's a spending decision and an investing decision. Give us an opportunity to compete for that business. That's an easy ask, but that's not really the ask I want to put in front of you. The hard one is what I want you to work on. The hard one is, and as much as I'll say this to everyone on the call, I'm saying this to myself as well, is to remember that you're going to die. Like, could be in 10 minutes. You don't know, right? But there's one truth we all know is that the ship is going to sail for every single one of us. And what we will have done with our lives is all that will be left is that legacy. And often what is holding us back from stepping out and asking those questions and challenging the way we do things and challenging the way things work in the world is our fear about what ifs. Well, what if I step out and they laugh at me? What if I step out and I fail? What if I step out and I hurt someone accidentally, unintentionally? If your intentions are for the good of humanity, if you have a true heart, then it's not about what ifs, it's about so what, right? So what? So what if you get laughed at? So what if you fail? fail, which is a social construct anyway. So what if you try to step out and that strategy didn't work and you have to backtrack and try a different way? So what, right? You're gonna die. Like, what do you don't have any time to waste? You know what I mean? So that's what I would challenge all of us to carry on for the rest of our day and every day after, is remember you're gonna die, and ask yourself, so what, the next time you see yourself mired in fears about what ifs.
Wisdom for the ages. I see you, Natalie, snapping, right? You know, there's the part of me that wants to keep talking because we have more time. And there's the part of me that's learning that sometimes you can just pause. So I do want to invite, especially on that good word, and each of us to just pause for a moment. Either you're going to stay with us for 15 more minutes or 30 more minutes, which we would love. Or you're going to need, as I've already seen, some folks to take a break. I'm sorry, you're going to need to step away. While you're pausing, Ananya, this is completely in the moment, but will you play my song?
Which one though? There too.
We Who. So I want to just invite you for a moment to hear some music with us and just let the words we've heard linger with us for a moment. Try to stay present. And then we'll come back with some questions and open up for others. Kiana, if you feel led to stand up, great.
We who believe in freedom cannot rest until it comes. We who believe in freedom cannot rest. Freedom cannot rest. We who believe in freedom cannot rest until it comes. Until the killing of black men, black mothers, sons is as important as the killing of white men, white mothers, sons. We who believe in freedom cannot rest. We who believe in freedom cannot rest until it comes. Not needing to clutch for power, not needing the light just to shine on me. I need to be just one in a number as we stand against tyranny. To me, young people come first. They come first. They have the courage where we fail. If I can just shine a light on as they carry us through the gale. We who believe in freedom cannot rest. Freedom cannot rest.
you. Thanks for being flexible with me, y'all, when that just felt like where to move us. So Ananya, do you want to maybe share some of the invitations that came up, and then we'll open up the mic. I was watching you were putting them in chat for us. Very good. A reminder.
Yodit, some music was going on. Did you ask me to share the demands?
Yeah, please.
Yeah. So starting with Ambra's offering, to consider what the real work is, to slow down, pause, and ask yourself, what is the real work? And also to ask different questions. This is for the funders, to hold us accountable to being better people. And then Lila asked us, what does it look like to build capacity? How do we get our voices heard to show funders what matters? And she also offered to take the time to figure out what our why is, what our purpose is, and who we are. And then Angela offered to be values aligned with your resources, with your time, your money, and energy. And she invited us beautifully to remember that we're going to die. And she offered that what we will have done with our lives is all that will be left. And what holds us back is our fear about what if? And what if we start asking, so what? So as Yodit offered, and as that's resting and lingering with you, I think this may be a good moment to transition into a question and answer part of this session, or community dialogue. And we could try using the raise your hand function, or if there's something that's really bubbling up for you right now that you want to ask. But we'll try actually asking you to bring yourself off of mute and just ask your question in the space or your comment.
You know, I always jump in with something to say. I haven't been in this space for a minute, and as we kind of celebrate coming back from Idlewild a year ago, I was really moved and touched by all of the ladies and all that you had to say. You know, I think of this transition, and only having been an employee most of my life, I never considered the things that you guys discussed today, right? And I'm telling you what it does to my heart and my mind to be able to consider a life of value, not just of rushing through, not just of being busy, not just of paying bills, right? But the value, Angela said it so good. She says, when you die, what will you have left, right? Just to say that I was at the office is not sufficient, you know? And I'm just reminded that how important the conversations are. My mama used to always say, if it's sense, it ain't common. And if it's common, it sure ain't sense. You know, now that's from a woman without an 8th grade education, but she was smart enough to know that. And I think it's important that we keep having these conversations so people can be, their minds can be expanded like you guys do for me. Thank you. Love you all. Thank you.
What's your name, preacher?
Watch out now. I ain't seen you in a while, sis.
What's your name?
I know you ain't really out. Daryl Johnson. I don't know if you've really
And what's
asked
the name of your organization?
We're Executive Director of Mentor to Youth.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
We had Angela who was trying to say something as well.
It took me a while to look for I was looking for the raise hand button and realized I had a hand I could just raise. Thank you for this wisdom and inspiration and community of companionship. So I'm grateful. My name is Angela. And the question I have is this disconnect, right, between people who want to share and people who actually are doing the good work, right? I was in a meeting this morning with an organization and a few funders, and I asked the CEO, what is it that we're missing? You know, what are funders wanting to fund? And your reality is so different. And the CEO didn't answer. He was too afraid to upset the funders who were on the phone, right? And we all know it. I know what it's like to be sitting in a position of asking and needing to follow money. But what's a better way to get this honest answer of what's really needed, right? Like what I heard here was what's really needed. I love how are you taking care of your people, your community, your team. But what is it that's keeping, like I know what's keeping us from the honest answer, but what's a way to ask it in a way that says we want an honest answer?
I have a response to that. I think that hearing an honest answer would mean loss of control, because money is about control, right? Deciding who gets what and who doesn't is about control. And so I need to hear, so if I'm a funder, I need to hear what makes me feel like I still have control and power over my money. And if I don't hear those things, I won't give you my money, right? As opposed to freely giving you my money because I trust you to do what you're going to do, and that I am no longer the source that knows what's best. I am deferring to you as the source that knows what's best. And because I trust you and because we're in relationship, I'm not going to question what you've done. But because I'm still trying to control you, I don't want to hear a real answer. It's a setup. Right. It's a trap. Right. It's a trap. So I think there has to be this reckoning from moving from I want to control this money to I want to be in genuine relationship with you. Yeah. I genuinely trust you. And as long as there's no shift in that, there can be no shift in power and there can be no shift in the money dynamic.
Amen. You're so right on. Mm-hmm.
I would offer Angela as someone that is in, I think there's a lot of similarities between the nonprofit and for-profit world when it comes to service. Because while nonprofits are trying to convince funders to fund the thing, for-profits are trying to convince clients to pay for the thing. It's the same thing. And something that shifted for me a few years ago, and I think I'm still in this shift, so I don't think it's completely shifted for me, but I can tell a difference already, is that I got to a place, kind of like what I said to Ambra, like ask them how they're taking care of their people. It is as much of a right and a sense of autonomy for the organization to question whether that funder is the right fit for them, whether that funder trusts them. And if they do not, then they're out. It doesn't matter how much money they have. You couldn't pay me to take a terrible $100 million client. I don't care what that would do for all of the people that I serve. I'm not going to sell my soul and defer my power to this massively unequal relationship because of the good I think it could do on the back end, because what is sacrificed through that is my humanity and our team's humanity. And if we've lost our humanity, we actually cannot be of service to the rest of the community. So I don't know how that conversation goes down in the nonprofit sector, but that was what came up for me, was more of like putting the organization putting itself into a position of evaluation of the funder to evaluate, is this the relationship that is the right relationship for our organization? And if it's not, and they're not willing to listen and they're not willing to hear, then it's not. But that comes back to fear, right? We don't say those things, we don't ask those questions because we're afraid they're going to say no. And I've served on nonprofit boards, so like I understand it from a board member perspective, but I know that that's the fear that's behind it, is we need this money, we need to do this thing for the community, and if they say no, we're dead in the water. But you're not dead in the water, you just haven't found the right mate yet, you know. So that was
building
what
that trust is really what I'm hearing.
What's that?
So I'm really hearing that building the trust is so important, right? That both way, that reciprocal relationship. Thanks, everyone.
Kiana, well, go ahead, Sophie. Kiana was off of mute, so I wondered if you had anything. Oh.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah. I'm not quite sure where to begin. I'm not actually part of a non-profit organization, which when I grew up in England was called a charity. And of course, charities has been around for millennia. But there used to be not enough for everyone. And now actually there is enough for everyone. It's just that everyone doesn't have it. It's not spread around. So, you know, we all know how the rich keep getting richer and the 0.01% has whatever percentage of the wealth in the entire world. And that wealth that they have doesn't come from nowhere. It comes from all the other people. So the question is, you know, how do you flatten that curve? How do you defund the billionaires? And, you know, we're always talking about how do we get a grant or how do we get the funders to give some money? And it's a position of asking someone who has money to give to someone who needs money. And my son has a well-paid job in financial organization in financial world, and his girlfriend works as a social worker. So, you know, we all know who gets paid best, and we all know which one is doing the most important work. And the point is, how do you stop all the money belonging to a few people, all the wealth belonging to a few people? How come when there's hard decisions to be made, like you hear, oh, well, there's not enough money, so hard decisions have to be made. And the hard decision always involves taking more money away from those who have not and giving more money to those who have. So that's really at the heart of it for me. I mean, I'm talking in terms of money, but I mean, obviously it's everything, not just money. And that inequality where some people have to ask and people get to decide who they will deign to give to is fundamentally disgusting, really. So that's where I'm at. And that's called capitalism. You can call it oligarchy, but that suggests that there was some point at which capitalism was nice. And if you can find that point for me, I'll give you a prize. Okay, I'm done.
Can I jump in here? First of all, thank you, everybody, for making this happen, for giving your time and your wisdom here. I've been working really hard to facilitate things like this for the communities that I lead and for my staff, and it's so, I'm so grateful that someone else is facilitating a space like this for me to do learning and reflection and connection. So thank you for that. Kiana, I'm fired up by what you said about funders, and they should just give us their money, and if they've given it to us, they should trust that we're going to do the thing that they want us to do, like that we've said we're going to do. And I'm thinking a lot about what that means in the context of my organization, and I'm grateful there's several other nonprofit childcare providers here on the call today. We've been meeting weekly to provide community and support for each other, and I'm thinking a lot about what it means to be really upfront with the families that we serve, especially families that have financial wealth or financial capacity, and how that the money from the people who enroll their children in our program moves through the community of our school. And I'm thinking a lot about what it means to enter into a social contract around our values with our families, and how we set clear expectations with them about what their money is doing for our community. That it's like, we don't really provide a childcare service. What we're doing is we're asking people to invest in a community vision that we share, and a vision for a future that we share. And so I'm really, I mean, funders is a whole other thing. We don't even do any fundraising at this point. So that's a new thing on the horizon that this pandemic has brought for us. But I'm thinking a lot about what our values can do, and what honesty and transparency and a unapologetic commitment to those values, and saying no, and all those things that we've talked about, what that looks like when we're in partnership, whether it's with, you know, quote unquote clients, or community partners and collaborators, or with funders. And just really thinking about that piece right now.
And if I can just counter that really fast, Etta, what you said was fine. I guess I was just going to say the language that I use, because I come from a faith background, is covenant. And when I think about covenant or contract, it's one where we all get to say what we need at the table honestly, and then we uphold each other to that with steps of accountability in there. And when you deep dive into a relationship from that perspective, that we are in a contract together, a covenant of respect and trust, the way that the relationship flows just dramatically becomes different, right? Like, you started from a different spot. So later on, you're able to say, hey, families, this thing didn't come through, but how can we wrap around each other and make the thing we said happen? Because you're not guided by the money, you're guided by the principles. So I would just offer, you know, that's my language, is a faith-based language, but I offer folks to use language that feels comfortable, but to know that you are entering in a contract with your employees, a contract with yourself to be an employee, with the folks you serve, with the folks who come to you, like all the arrows should be circular. There should never be single direction arrows if you're doing the good work. Everybody's had a say and everybody benefits. So I'll stop talking, but thank you, Etta, for saying that. It's important.
Yes, covenant is the exact right word. I also come from a faith background where we use that word a lot, and I'm doing a lot of thinking about that as the Jewish New Year is coming in a couple of days. But I never know if that's going to be jargony or I'm going to get side eye around that. But I will lean into the covenant word from now on. So thank you. That's great.
Etta, if we don't name that the work that we're doing is spiritual work, it doesn't have anything to do with religion. This is spiritual work. That is what we're doing. And so if we're not talking about that every opportunity we get, then we are not having the right conversation. Whether it's anti-racism or changing our organizations. Two things I want to name before we wrap up, because we have 4 minutes. One is just an observation that once again, power got, at least in the last 15 minutes, a whole lot of airplay. And we didn't name the impacted communities, who, by the way, many foundations and funding sources made their money on the backs of. Foundation money from Kresge, for example, is extracted dollars from stores that were in BIPOC communities and beyond. And what we now know to be essential workers worked at Kresge. Kellogg, come on, y'all. Everybody on this call done put money in Kellogg's coffers, right? So let's remember also where we give our attention. The point of centering justice is to focus our eyes on the future. Ambra is the future. Angela is the future. Lila is the future. And if we can take and all of you as well, all of you, because you signed up for a session called Reimagining the Fall, and you were interested in how we transform, keep your eyes on the future and on the folks. If you look at every significant movement in the history of this country, somebody with Black or brown skin was in the center of it. And generally, they were occupying a woman's body, right? So we can talk about funders all day long. Let me assure you, in our lifetime, we are not going to shift that power significantly out of those coffers. But what we can do is the transformational work of making what we want and need. and Kiana used the word benefit, and I saw that with our mutual aid societies here over the last 6 or 7 months. They weren't caught up in this bullshit paradigm we were in. They just called folks up, moved money, moved resources, helped with people, got it across 23. They didn't need a lot of accolade. They didn't need a lot of, writing grants and, right? There was a Google spreadsheet and a Facebook page, and hundreds of families got taken care of, right? We can look to them. We can look to the mutual aid network of Ypsilanti. We can look for the Huron Valley Mutual Aid Group. We can look to others outside of our sector for a way forward. And always, 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 you can bet on Black women. Ambra, you got a final word for us?
Transparency, honesty. Some of the best conversations I had with a funder was a small foundation, and we started down one path, and I went to her and I was like, okay, so yeah, that's not gonna work. And she said, I trust you to run your organization. I didn't even understand what to say because that had never happened before. But 2 years later, we easily exceeded those goals. But part of it was transparency, me going and saying, this is not gonna work. We can't do it that way. I need the freedom to play around with this and to fail maybe and try again. But I need you to trust me that I can get to the outcome. And that's a different conversation. It's a different conversation. At my daughter's school, there's this transparency where they say, look, this is how much money we got. And we need the people who got a little bit more to give a little bit more. And that's the end. This is the checkbook. That is hard, but that's true. That's the way they do it. And so, when you're transparent and you tell the truth, that's it.
I wonder if Lila or Angela has a few last words before we say goodbye.
No, I'm just going to say, be authentic, right? Know your why, your purpose. And yeah, I think being authentic in your communications in every aspect of how you, live your life or build relationships with others, your funders, your, friends in the community, etc. I think it's important. Thank you.
Thank you again, everybody, for being here. And my final words would be to be brave even when you don't feel brave. When you wake up in the morning and you're like, I don't know if I can do this. I don't know if I can muster up the courage to say what needs to be said and do what needs to be done. Just find whatever little kernel of bravery that is hiding in a corner of your heart and pull it up, put it in front of your eyes, or call Yodit and just be like, be courageous. No, don't call Yodit. Call your friend. Call whoever is the brave person that comes to your mind, and just keep doing that. And then one day you won't have to do that anymore. And then some days you may still have to do that. But that's it for me. Thank you so much for having me.
Does Delilah have any final words for us?
And do you have any final words? Nope, whole lot of shy going on here.
So as you can already feel, if you've been here before, we made a slight adaptation to this session, and we are continuing to do that, and we really value and turn to your feedback when we make those shifts. So please do fill out the survey in the chat box, and have a wonderful Wednesday.
Would you like to say goodbye? Bye.